Hi, my name is koda.kailin, and I'm an aspiring writer. I'm not sure what I'm gonna name this video. I think I'm just gonna cover everything. I'm just gonna give my 2 cents on my experience with workshopping, different workshopping structures, why you should workshop, what is workshopping. I've been in my writing program at college for 3 years now, and I have 1 year left, so I've done like plenty of different workshops with different size groups, different people, even like different ways to like give feedback. Yeah, some of them were more helpful than others, and also how to run a workshop group and how to like make your own workshop group. I assume a lot of people watching this video are kind of just like lone writers who've just been writing like in their room, and like maybe not a whole lot of people know about it. That was kind of like me for like a lot of my life. Like before like I decided I wanted to like make a career out of it and go to school for it. It's basically when you get together with a group of people, either one person or hundreds. But if you're in the hundreds, then you might want to split into different groups, you know? But yeah, workshop is basically when you bring a story to the table. You might read an excerpt of it, like your chapter, a page, maybe even just a paragraph. Or you might just explain like what you're working on, like your project, and kind of like the plot line and like maybe like the rough structure of it. Usually you'll bring some questions you have for your piece to the group. We call them feedback questions, so it kind of prompts certain feedback from like the group. As opposed to having everybody comment on everything, you can just have people kind of like zero in their feedback on like a certain area. Maybe you'll ask questions on characters, maybe their transformations, like their character development throughout the story. Maybe you'll have questions on like the actual plot line, kind of like the chronological order of the plot. Maybe you'll have questions on like the emotions, like the emotional impact of the scenes. That's something I tend to ask a lot in my workshopping, because when I'm writing it, I have an idea of the emotion I want to convey. But after I kind of already know the story inside and out, I'm not really getting that emotion for the first time anymore. So it's actually like really valuable to have other people hear like my excerpt and kind of gauge like their emotional reaction to it and see kind of how they got it and if it landed or not. Workshops are really important because they make you think differently about your piece. Workshopping should always be a way to prompt the writer to ask more questions about their story and to make them think differently about it. And consider like even more areas and more possibilities, as opposed to other people kind of giving their own ideas and kind of inserting their own vision onto the piece. That's something that I feel like writers need to avoid when giving feedback, trying to like take their own ideas after hearing the piece and then insert it onto like the writer's view. I feel like it takes a lot more respect and maturity and like knowledge to actually ask questions that'll prompt the writer to think differently about it and to come up with like more ideas, and it'll be a lot more genuine when those ideas are coming from the writer's own head. It's really important to work with the text that you see in front of you. If a person's asking if this character's emotional mental breakdown is landing, you should analyze what they already have in place and how they can improve that. For example, if they're having a breakdown over their mom and their mom isn't like really present in the story, which is why it doesn't really land that hard, you shouldn't give a bunch of reasons on how to make their emotional breakdown more emotional. For example, like more tears. You should actually like kind of like analyze like the source of like why they're having a mental breakdown, their mom, and then think about the structure of how the mom was introduced during the story. Then maybe a good suggestion would be to ask, when's like the last time the character saw their mom? And would seeing their mom more recently help the emotional impact land better? Asking questions in a way that could prompt more ideas. And asking questions like that now has inspired the writer to kind of like think about their own story, to reflect back on their own story, rather than just trying to defend their own ideas against your ideas, if that makes sense. Turn it into like a conversation, and an open conversation is way more valuable than bombarding a writer with different ideas. Workshopping will have you thinking about your own story in a unique way, and have you think about things you might not even considered were a problem in your story. It can be really intimidating to workshop your piece and feeling inadequate and like your piece is like the most inexperienced in the room. But that's the point. Like if you're coming in with gold to the workshop, then you're not gonna get anything out of it. A lot of people who come thinking that their piece is already good won't workshop anything with their feedback. They'll say the same old golden story. If you don't think your writing's good, then you should be workshopping. But that said, everyone's writing is good. You know, you wrote it, but workshops are gonna make it better. And have you think about it in a new way. You might also meet people who have lived a similar life with the character you're trying to write and can kind of speak to more nuance to that character if they want to. And it's not their obligation to give you any of that information. I'm currently going to Humber Polytechnic for their Bachelor of Creative and Professional Writing. It's going really well so far. We've done like so many different workshops though, like pretty much each class, each professor does it differently. Even one professor will do it like 3 different ways until like they feel like it works the best. I was in a classroom size setting, so around like 20 to 30 people to kind of like workshop with. When you're making your writing group, it might just be you right now, or maybe you have a big group already. But I feel like for a lot of people, they'll be starting with just them and trying to outreach to people who are also, you know, like writers. But I'll try to speak on various group sizes and kind of how like that works and kind of what that looks like. The first workshop I want to talk about is something I'll call the all-inclusive or the round table. So that's when everybody in the room is workshopping at the same time, the same piece. This one is really accessible because it can be with, you know, 5 people or 100 people, but obviously if you have 100 people, they're not all gonna get the chance to comment, right? But essentially, they all sit in a circle, or they all sit like in a square, a room, whatever. Circle is just like the more equal one, because kind of everybody can see each other, and everybody's kind of in the conversation. The writer workshopping will read their piece, they'll tell them their feedback questions, and sometimes they'll go right away and just start giving feedback. Whoever's ready will go first. Sometimes there'll be like a 5-minute break for people to gather their thoughts after hearing it, and then they can share. I feel like it was most helpful for me when we kind of got like 5 minutes to kind of gather our thoughts. The other kind of writing group I want to get into is something I'll call the mitosis. So that's kind of when you have a big group of people that split off into different groups. For example, like 25 people, 5 groups of 5, and then they'll workshop just within their own groups. The mitosis method is probably my least favorite method of workshopping, especially when you only have one space to work with. Online is a bit easier because you can kind of just break off into different like writing rooms and like writing circles and get your shit done. But in my program, we kind of had like 2... We had our main classroom, and we sometimes had a spare classroom to use. Or sometimes we'll have like 3 groups in one room, 1 group in the other room, and I always like prayed to be the one in the one group in the one room, even though I never got that. Because I can't hear when people are talking around me. If there's like a conversation happening to my left and there's a conversation happening to my right and then somebody's reading in front of me, you've lost me. Like, especially when they're trying to read their piece and then I hear another person reading their piece and then they finish reading their piece and then they're clapping when like the person in front of me is still reading their piece. Cooked. Oh, it's just too hard. If you have like a big group in person, honestly, it's easier to just do like the all-inclusive round table method and just accept that not everyone's going to have a chance to give you feedback because there's too many people. Another reason why we split off into smaller groups rather than just doing the all-inclusive method is because people in my class were saying that like not enough people were giving them feedback. People were scared or nervous to give feedback because there was kind of a group and anybody could give feedback. So I guess in a way like the lack of pressure to give feedback meant that like not as many people were giving feedback. But I think that's also kind of like a skill issue. Like, if you're in a workshop, then you should just accept you're giving feedback. A really good way to just overcome that is just have mandatory feedback. Like, everybody has to say at least one thing. The smaller tables were also good, though, like groups of 4 to 6, because it feels a lot more intimate when you have a smaller group. And it feels like they kind of like really like get and really consume your story. It also gives people in the group to get all of their thoughts out when they're giving feedback rather than cutting themselves off so somebody else can go. It's also easier to have unique methods of giving feedback when you have a smaller group. For example, writing it down on a piece of paper rather than typing it up. The last group size of workshopping is just one other person and yourself, so kind of swapping stories and giving feedback based off of their feedback questions. I feel like that's like not as effective because you're only getting one opinion for your story rather than a bunch of different opinions. And then you can kind of see what was more popular. Also, if you're doing one-on-one, there's a high chance that you'll just be doing it with like a close friend. And a close friend might just sugarcoat things and not actually tell you the constructive criticism you need to hear. It's also just way more valuable to get advice and feedback from people who have various perspectives and who are a lot different than yourself, because they're probably thinking about your story in a completely different way that'll really help you make it better. I'll quickly go over how we constructed the various workshops. So one of them, and the most popular method that's used especially by like older writers, is like the silent receival method, where you read your story, you read your excerpt, you explain your story, and then when people are giving you feedback based off your feedback questions, you just shut up and you just take it. Like whatever they tell you, you don't open your mouth, you don't ask for clarification, you don't defend yourself, essentially. You just kind of let the feedback roll in and you just write it down, or like they'll post it. I would say I like it. I would say it's middle of the row, because I feel like I need a period of silent receival, and then I also need a period of clarifying questions afterwards, because once I start conversing mid-feedback, I can't stop. A workshop method that works really well for, especially if you're a visual learner, is handwritten feedback. So in one of my classes, Creative Lab 2, my professor Jill had papers that she gave everybody, and it was divided into 4 different quadrants. So one of them was, what did you like about like the piece you heard? What questions did you have for the piece? Which is kind of like where like the critique comes from, because whatever questions you ask is kind of what they need to work on. And then a quadrant for their feedback questions, the ones that kind of like they want to like guide and like what they actually want feedback on. And then another quadrant for a drawing, kind of just like a visual or like a symbol that, well, you were kind of imagining in your mind's eye while hearing the piece. I feel like the drawing especially is really cool and important for workshop feedback, because it kind of gives the writer an idea of what images and what symbols are kind of like the most relevant in the story. And it's also just nice to see your work kind of done creatively in that visual format. In my classes, we mainly just do type feedback, where we listen to the piece, they tell us the feedback questions, and we just type it up in that session and then post it to like the discussion board or like any kind of group chat afterwards. Sometimes typed feedback or handwritten feedback isn't mandatory, and it's just mandatory for the feedbackers to show up and give a verbal response. So the writer has to write all of their feedback down to like remember it. A good way to write down so much feedback really quickly like that is to write it in like the shortest paraphrased sentence as you can. So for example, someone comments on how my character isn't really reflecting their original personality anymore and they kind of need to work on their consistency with their tone. I would just write consistent MC tone and then keep it pushing, because you don't want to spend too much time writing word for word what people are telling you. It's important to just get like the essence of what they're telling you, and then write that down. Also, you might get the same feedback twice, but usually people don't like to say the same thing unless they get called out for it. But I actually don't mind it, because hearing the same thing multiple times just means that it's stronger and more important. So you could also put down kind of like little tally marks next to each point if it's multiple, if it's been said multiple times. You could also just record the feedback session if you're not a fast typer, and then just write up the notes afterwards. Our semester ended end of April, and I really wanted to kind of stay motivated this summer while writing, because I tend to not really stay consistent with it over the summer break when there's no external assignments kind of pushing me and keeping me in that zone. So it's really important for me to kind of like reach out to some of my peers and some of my classmates and just ask them if they were also interested in kind of writing together over the summer and making like a little like writing group. So I reached out to some people in my program, and I think that pretty much all of them said yeah, like I'd be interested. Maybe like they didn't have like the availability in their schedule later on, but like usually people are down, especially if they're like already like writing consistently. And like maybe like the one thing they're missing with like a second pair of eyes, or like somebody just read what they're writing. A lot of people and writers will just keep it to themselves for a hot minute, and I feel like a writing workshop is a really great way to kind of put your work out there on like a very low stakes level. It's not like performing your piece in front of a crowd of strangers or anything like that. It's just kind of presenting what you've worked on in its rawest form, and people like receiving that with respect, dignity, and like constructive criticism. It's honestly like a really beautiful process to kind of like see people's, not only like their stories, like the actual meat and content itself get better, but also just seeing their general like writing techniques and writing process improve as well. I don't know if you guys have ever done like D&D or like even just like a group game like Manhunt. So, it's hard to explain, but like the energy exchange of like group work like that, especially like creative group work that's kind of centered around like shared passion, shared interests, really inspires people. Like the energy exchange, it's like, it's not like you're losing energy, like it's just kind of like you're like bouncing off each other, bouncing ideas off each other, and like even if like you're an introvert like myself, that like kind of like back and forth of ideas like actually makes me like really inspired and like fills me with energy to write. I feel like a big reason why people don't pursue workshopping is because they're kind of scared of getting their ideas attacked or even like their character attacked by other writers. So again, it's really important to stress the fact that people are critiquing the writing techniques and the structure of your story, not your ideas, and definitely not you as a writer. When I was making my writing group, it was also really important for me to think about community guidelines and the workshopping rules before actually inviting people to like the server, because I wanted to just really set like a baseline of respect and dignity in the workshop. The community guidelines that I made for my writing group are: number 1, continual kindness and respect to our fellow writers and their work. Number 2, constructive criticism should be aimed at making the story structure and writing techniques better, not the writer or their idea. Number 3, each workshop will announce any content warnings they may discuss or read, even if we've heard them before. And number 4, racism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and bigotry of any kind won't be tolerated. Those issues will not be discussed or commented on in a stories workshop unless everybody in the call gives specific consent. I also made sure to ask like the people on like our session 0 call last week about what they thought of the community guidelines, because I can't host or like be like some sort of like leader without getting the input of like the people I'm trying to lead. And they seemed like pretty down for the community guidelines, pretty simple. And then I also told them the workshop guidelines. Like our first call was just kind of like an intro for everybody's stories, and we'll jump into the actual workshops next week. But I decided to tell them the workshop guidelines ahead of time so they kind of know what they're getting into. So the workshop guidelines are: number 1, each person in the call, because we're doing it over Discord, with a grace period of 10 minutes after the official start time, which is Sunday at 10 a.m. for us, will get 20 minutes to workshop their piece. If there are more than 7 people in call, we'll split into 2 different writing circles. So at 10:10, we'll start with the first person until 10:30, and then we'll transition to the next person, and then we'll probably go until 10:50, 11, and just keep it pushing. The writer workshopping is allowed to divide their time between explaining their story or reading, and also people's feedback however they want. I suggest 5 minutes to explain/read their story, 10 minutes of the silent receival, and then 5 minutes to ask questions and converse with the group. That's kind of the structure I'll be using when I workshop my piece. But I wanted to keep it open and not so like constricted, despite there being like rules. So kind of like you can navigate it how you need to, make it fit what you want it to for your workshop. Because for example, you might be starting a new idea, you might need a bit of extra time to explain it, you might want to read as like a longer excerpt that'll take 10 minutes, like half your time, which is fine, that's just less time for feedback, right? Yeah, and I think it's also powerful to give choice back to the writers in the workshop, instead of confining it to a very tight-knit like schedule. Because I want people to feel like they have a say in kind of how their workshop goes and what they're getting from it. Yeah. Number 3, everyone who workshops is expected to stay until the end of the last workshop in their call. That one's going to have exceptions, of course, because people are going to have to leave early, but I definitely wanted to make this a rule at the beginning of the calls, because it's just kind of like a respect thing. Like you pay for the concert, you stay till the end of the concert. Number 4, there's going to be like a timekeeper for everyone's like workshopping. I'll just be the timekeeper, but if we have to split into multiple like different writing circles, because like we're exceeding like the 7-person limit to keep it within 2 hours, I'll like ask like somebody else to be the timekeeper for that group. I really want the timekeeper to kind of just keep things like moving. And also to kind of like remind the writer how much time they have left, because at least when I'm workshopping, time flies by. I have no clue how much time I have left, especially when I'm reading. So I kind of just want the timekeeper to say starting now, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then when they say 20 minutes, it'll just kind of like conclude the workshop and we'll move on to the next one. And especially if people want to follow like the 5 minutes reading, 10 minutes receiving feedback, and 5-minute discussion, it's nice to have like that little reminder to keep you going. Number 5, the order of the workshop will just be decided by the order of who joins call, which I feel like is very fair. Along with like the grace period of 10 minutes to kind of like keep it as in like, you didn't even see like the first one and now you're trying to sneak in for like your workshop at the end. Like, I don't know, I just feel like it's nice to have like not only the grace period but also like a fair order of workshops. Number 6, people workshopping will bring 3 feedback questions based on character, setting, tension, conflict, transformation, pacing, emotions, structure, etc. Just to kind of help the writer get the most out of their workshop. And number 7, people giving feedback are encouraged to write it out and post it in the stories like channel, because I kind of gave each story like their own little like Discord channel so they can post like the draft and whatever they want to it, like photos, whatever. But it's not mandatory to type up feedback and then also post it to somebody's channel. If you're making your own writing group, you can make it mandatory or not. But I feel like having it open to writing down feedback and posting it if you want to is kind of nice, because it almost like it's like a reverse psychology thing where it makes people want to give better feedback and want to like have at least better like verbal feedback if they're not going to write it down. But also if they do write it down, they're not like forced to or anything like that. It's not like out of like a need. It's out of like respect and like you want like the writer to remember what you said. So yeah, that's kind of how like I have like my writing group set up so far. I also suggested for like our first like session 0 of the writing group that people make little like slideshows for their stories, which is actually so hypocritical because I didn't make one. Freaking like 3 people made some and I didn't make one because I was coming up with like a new story idea, so I didn't have the time to. People will put in the effort that you need them to, as long as you have the courage to ask and like the respect to understand if they can't deliver. I said that word a lot while making this video, respect, and I haven't really thought about it too much in relation to writing and workshopping, but that's like kind of like the pinnacle of workshopping in general. If you don't have respect for each other, then there's really no like room to workshop with them, because they're just gonna say things that you don't really get or you don't really like connect with. That'll be a big thing if you've never workshopped before. There'll be feedbacks that you feel. There'll be feedbacks that you know, like, touch something, like, in your soul. Like, I mean, that's kind of extreme, but, like, there's definitely feedbacks where you're like, they get it. They get it. And I feel like you can tell when they don't really respect your story, because they'll just give feedback that's really, like, surface level. It won't be anything, like, constructive, or it might just be rude. Or, like, they'll just insert all of their ideas, because, like, almost like a superiority complex that they feel like their ideas are better than yours, which is another reason why I try to like stray away from just suggesting different ideas and to just actually ask questions and make the writer think for like themselves. If anyone isn't really familiar with those kind of terms, like, you know, like transformation, like pacing, and like what I mean by like an emotional impact, I can like make a video going over like those terms, either like I think there's like 7, or like doing it like one by one as like kind of like a series. Let me know what you think. But yeah, that's kind of like everything I know about like workshopping. If there's anybody who wants to like make a writing group, feel free to just like drop your interest in the comments, and you know, if you see somebody who's kind of like at a similar level as yourself, feel free to reply to them and, you know, try to form your own thing. It's actually really chill. All you need is a device like Discord, so you can have like a nice server with all your stories, and it's just like a nice platform to be able to have like a group call on. Yeah, you can do it too. It's awesome. It's really fun, and your writing will get exponentially better if you do. Not saying that to have a good story you need a workshop, but you'll be a lot more confident with what you've written if you do. There's also just like no better feeling than somebody just truly getting what you're trying to say. And it doesn't happen often, especially like when you're neurodivergent and it's hard for you to, I guess, like connect with people on like such like a deep level. Or at least it's hard for me. Having like writing workshop where people like see like my passion in its rawest form, and then also like try to make it better is such like a nice like bonding experience, and it's just like a great way to make friends, honestly. If you do like make a writing group, make sure like you stay safe, obviously, like stranger danger and whatever. But also like treat each other with respect, and I hope it goes well.